All right, so now we're going to work with foot wedges. So I want to draw big for these, so I'm going to do, I don't know, 3 or 4, maybe 5, and draw pretty large. And I'm going to draw using the bones of the foot as a general guideline to draw the wedges. And you'll see how I work the wedge and looking for the triangular wedge a little bit. And you'll see where I get into some difficulty and I have to alter a little bit of what I was drawing to make sure I get the proper view. These can be very difficult, and I think it'd be a good example for you to look at and kind of test your knowledge through that. So as you're drawing foot wedges, draw these with me, and then after you go through this lesson, and then try some on your own. If you have pictures of the skeleton or bones, if you have your own bones, foot bones, or draw from your feet, or actually put on socks, or have your friends put on socks, your significant other or whoever, parents, siblings, the mailman, probably not the mailman, but you get the idea, and have them put on socks and draw foot wedges, triangular wedges from that. All right, so I'm starting off here. You can see roughly the view that I have. It's just a little different than what I'm holding down below just because of the perspective. And now I'm going for the wedge area. So looking at now the malleolus and getting those aligned. Remember, high on the inside and low on the outside. Then I'm feeling you and telling you about that strong arch that we see, the medial arch in through there, very, very strong. Coming down, trying to block out and feel the calcaneus bone in its curvature and then its blockiness in the front, and see how well that goes inside what will be the metatarsals coming on top of it. Then I'm figuring out now the top of the wedge and then getting where the tibia and fibia clamp onto the top of the talus in there as a bone. So I'm drawing bone, but that's not going to be the ending point. It's going to be a little bit more wedge, but the bones help. Bones, and I feel, and a lot of artists feel this way, bones are more important structurally for the foot than muscles are. There are some muscles we're going to learn in addition to the ones we've already talked about with the lower leg. So, all right, getting the triangular wedge to come through a little bit, feeling that transverse arch carry on all the way through and then down now over into the end of the metatarsal there and into the phalanges of the big toe and then the small toe coming through, and I'm going to wedge the back of it off and bring that toe down a little bit, and feeling the creased area there where we feel those creases of the foot, and then getting that top wedge of the foot and then downward, and now bringing up underneath a little bit more of the foot padding to feel that. Now on this medial side, we're gonna feel more of that arch cutting into and going underneath, so it's not a strong straight or strong line. And so you'll see where I get into difficulty when I do a bottom view. The last one of these that I do, or one of the last ones, and I have to change it. And I'll show you how I made that mistake and altered it. It's easy to do. So there's that strong crease if we are in a shoe. And we're coming down, and I'm just blocking off roughly the proximal phalanges, and then putting on a little beginning of the toe. I'm not going to get into nor am I wanting to get every single toe. Here we go. So we're getting more of that wedge, and I'll darken this in to tighten this up a bit. Triangular blocky type wedges coming off the ankle or the malleolus area in between, feeling that top plane. And notice how it's curved closer to the medial area where we really turn down, and then it's a really long slope down to the lateral area on the other side. So coming in through here and just finishing out this wedge in the front. There's the true center, but the arch turns further, more medial. I'm going to bring, just finding one of the condyles around the proximal area, then adding a little bit more of the distal, and I could probably go a little further with that. That's okay for now. And just feeling that, like slicing off the toe at the medial condyle, just to feel it all the way coming through, and then that underneath cutting part, Notice how on the bone area of the bone that I'm holding, where we get up back into the tarsals of the cuneiform bones, there, the navicular bone, that comes over the top of the calcaneus underneath. That's important to show that in wedging. So the calcaneus goes up and underneath. See how that overlaps? There we go. Bringing that pad through a little bit and wedge that through. And over, getting some of those arrows. Use those lines and arrows to teach yourself to contour. Teach yourself what's going on with the form by doing those. Those are important. Sometimes I omit those. It's a mistake if I do, just to show myself and to show the viewer, you students of mine in YouTube, what's going on contouring around that body. These will turn underneath generally as we get those kind of rows of toes, and these will turn up and over and underneath. So I think of them as a boat or some like a car almost, like an automobile. It's funny how that is. We right to the body a little bit. Here we go, a little bit further out would look a little bit better. All right, moving on now to the next one. So I'm going to take a posterior view underneath a little bit and take a look at a more difficult pose where we get a little bit of that underneath arching of the foot as it comes up underneath the lateral side and the fifth metatarsal and curves up underneath. Now a lot of that's filled in with plantar muscles, flexor muscles that I'm not going to go into deep analysis of those, but the plantar ligament and muscle through there, especially the ligament, is strong, and I'll indicate that in another drawing, maybe on this one, but we'll see. So I'm just indicating now the position of that foot. And as you can see, I've got a little bit I'm going to see underneath, and I'm going to see some of the top too to show that interesting view how we can get on a form a little to see some of the top and the bottom. That's how you know that the form is curved, very curved, quite frankly. Remember, there's many different curves. There's the transverse curve across the arch, the top arch. The underneath of the foot is very curved too, so it's curved under. And then we have the longitudinal curve from the longest curve, and then of course the curve on the lateral edge, and then also the medial edge as well. So we have many different points, and then and of course the calcaneus bone is not in its center. It helps to balance the lateral curve, which is sheared and shaved and cut into up to the medial malleolus, or the ankle bone on the inside of the foot. All right, so now I've got the gesture of the foot, and again, I'm working really big. I'm using Conte sticks, so if you've never used Conte sticks before, they're lovely. Sometimes I like to draw small, sometimes I'd like to draw medium and big, and sometimes I just like to be really physical and almost painterly with the drawing. And so these are Conte sticks, which are pretty chalky, and they've got a little bit of wax in them so they won't smear too much, but they're still pretty soft and chalky. And as you notice, I like to lay in with a sanguine and then go back with a black or a brown on top. Kind of a old master look to them, I suppose. So squaring off, triangulating. Notice how I already have a triangle. Notice how I have a long longitudinal curve. Those are things that you want to get early. So a curve and a longitudinal arc and arch to the foot, and you can see where I'm seeing underneath as well. So I'm drawing now on top of the calcaneus bone, getting a little bit thicker and adjusting for the pad and the bursa on the Achilles heel, but especially the pad underneath. More padding here, feeling that over, and I have to be careful not to undercut the bottom. Now I'm showing you the transverse arch coming all the way through to here, and then I'm going to adjust a little bit, and now I'm picking up now that the metatarsal of the fifth. Remember, that's halfway between the back of the foot there at the calcaneus ending point and about where the small toe ends. And so I'm going to indicate that it's about that halfway point. I'm feeling it about right, probably a little bit longer. and I'll mark it right there. So there's halfway between those. Now I'm not really drawing from the bone anymore, am I? I'm just kind of holding my hand. So once you know this, you're good. Now that curves over from that point there. Those bones curl over. That's a slice point to get back to the big toe. Now we see underneath. See how we can see underneath the foot some and on top. That's a unique feature. That's why you know that these structures of the human form can be torqued and twisted and curved a little bit. So where I block off all those toes at the first toe there, or the pinky toe, and then back to the what's probably the second toe, and then go underneath to the big toe with the padding. Now I'm working on top of the padding point to get that to come down, working over the calcaneus region to get that to square up a little bit. Of course, the fibula is located on there. We get the malleolus and that C-clamp look, clamping back, and then the malleolus up over the arch, the transverse arch, to get back to the medial malleolus, which will be higher through there. It's a challenging, interesting look as it's curving slightly away from us as well. Now picking up the dark here, and we'll start to see that padding. Now right through there is the end of the pinky, and that's all toes being sliced off, and they're curving, they're going back to. The big toe, ball of the foot, that fat padding right in through there, I'm going to indicate that. That gets a little flatter. That gets to about the plantar ligament in through there, and I'm cutting in a line to show that we get both. It's a nice curve. And then there we have the fifth tuberosity of the fifth, which shows us that nice division. We all see that on our feet. It's a very bony protrusion, and it's unique to everyone. We all have it. The ball of the foot or the back of the heel, the fat pad on that. Keeping it volumetric. In triangular and wedge, then just feeling the planes of the fibula as it connects over, and then up. And that C-clamp arch, clamping down on the talus, down to the navicular over there, and then the cuneiforms, the three cuneiform bones. And we have the cuboid. You don't have to remember that. Just all you have to say is tarsals or cuneiform bones, and we've got it. The talus is separate, and certainly the calcaneus is a very important bone. Curving over that's very curved. And then we get this curving over, and that's right where that turns. It will turn down. That's the highest part of the arch. There's our center. Right there's the center where I make that cut of the entire foot, actually, in perspective to the big toe, which is underneath, which would stick out. Undercutting now, this will undercurve in through here. Undercurving that foot. There we go. So those toes would stick out a little bit longer. I'm cutting them off for now. Ball of the foot. Big toe would be back underneath and behind a little bit and pointing out. And we fill those tendons and those bones. Directing a little bit longer through there, we could see that. Underneath would be in shadow more. And giving contouring expression to the strength of those pads that we get on the lateral side. That'll be on the lateral side, not the medial side. Sometimes even I forget a little bit if I don't draw feet for a while. All right, the next one here, we're going to go underneath a little bit. You're going to see where this gets challenging, and I mix up where the fat pads go, the foot, and I change them. And you'll see me take a look at that and say, okay, I'll go back and analyze and alter it. So when you're drawing from the skeleton, you don't see all the muscles, and you're having to memorize the wedges. Sometimes it can be a little tricky, and that's really good testing to go back and correct yourself. So I'm drawing an underneath view of the foot. Now remember, we're on the medial side, which is closest to us. And so as I get deeper into the wedging of the drawing, I start to forget that, and I start to conceive it more as a lateral, and then you can see where I'm like, okay, I've got to change this, and then I go back and I make the change. Remember that the fat pads that are on the ball of the foot, the big toe, and then the bottom underneath the big toe, and then around over to more of the lateral side, and allowing the inside to be a more open kind of space as we go gradually into the curve of the foot. All right, so here I am now getting the ultimately getting the wedging of the foot working, the calcaneal triangular part, and as a wedgie block, and underneath a little bit, and coming over and curving that through. So feeling that arch, it's going to be a strong arch. I'll need to see more of the side of the calcaneus bone as we come through, so that will soften up later right in through there. And the top of it too as well, that'll start to soften a little bit and to put that back into better perspective. So getting that nice curve moving. And then feeling where the condyle of the metatarsal ends to the big toe, and then up through that triangular nice wedge all the way up to the malleolus. Then we have the malleolus, the medial malleolus, which I'm really looking up into and really arching over. So it's really a forced perspective, which is a really fun view actually. So it's really forced up in through there. It comes over, fingers over and arches over. So feeling that underneath. Now, that strong line right there is so strong it needs to be softened later, and I'll show you why. It's because on the medial side, we curve up to the wedge, the top wedge of the foot, more softly rather than a harder edge. Otherwise, if we keep doing that, it will start to look like the lateral side. So I miss it there, and I have to go back and change it. It's good that I leave some of those things. If I miss something, a lot of times I'll just take it out, but I mean, it's rarely I do. Not that I'm perfect, but this one I wanted to really show you how easy that can be when you're drawing from a simplified form, or in this case, kind of almost out of my head. Just I'm using the skeleton as a little bit of a guide. Now, right here, the foot pads are working, but the curvature should be on this side, the lateral side, and so I conceive it. So you can start to see it come together. I'm starting to imagine that curve being more now on the medial side, and that's going to be incorrect as we go along. I should be curving it. That's okay there, but I should be curving it more to the lateral side. Just getting the big toe area and going to wedge that off as it goes back into kind of a point through there. Finding the center. And so, hey, buddy, you're missing the lateral padding of the foot. You've got it on the, you really don't have it all, and that will have to end. So we come in through here, we're going to soften the calcaneus area a little bit further. That works. And through here, and you can tell like this is, okay, something's going, I need to soften there. So there we go. Now I realize it, and I've got to start to soften it, and I've got to change it there. Now you can see where I made some adjustments. I had to go back and rethink it for a moment. So I made some adjustments. You can see the stronger line now on the lateral side underneath the foot. That is starting to get the right foot padding area coming through to get us back over into the heel. Now I take the black and say, okay, now let's start to clear up this wedge of this foot issue. So when we do this, we're not drawing for full detail. We're getting a blockier feel. And notice how as I make that line, that curve, I start to soften as it gets back up to the malleolus there. That's important. So now the balls of the foot and the wedging of the foot that are important. So we come through here and we can start to see how the fat padding through there. Now we have it on the right part of it. That's going to come up and over, and that's going to hit now into the calcaneus area, into the Achilles heel and a wrap, and it really protects all that material from the wear, the massive amount of wear and tear that you get as just a living, breathing human being, and as an athlete. If you were a former athlete or you're still an athlete, you understand how much that gets. Now we're softening it up. We get a little bit of more underneath view of that, coming in and over and back through the calcaneus, up and through that. Now we soften this up a little bit. through here. So all that is softer, and this material is moving up and into back up to the malleolus more gradually. Now this curves over and underneath like it is, and it's gradually, yeah, there you go, there's a softer curve. Now we get the right curving in through there. And where my hand is, then I want to start to really illustrate that, where that gets pushed up in there at a more gradual trajectory. It's not on the lateral side where the fifth metatarsal tuberosity is. That's really a hard pad to see. Here it's softer on this side. Yeah, gradually now tightening up these edges, getting that little center part of the plantar ligament. That's that little, sometimes when you flex your foot, you see it on the bottom, you can get this little division. We'll talk about that later. It doesn't show up all the time, but in some feet it does, do certain activities. So here we can see, again, a little bit of the top, just touch of the foot, while we're seeing mostly just the bottom, and then we see where the toe directions would go, maybe just a little bit longer, and underneath would be a little bit more shading and flattened out. We'd see that underneath. There we go. So that would bottom out. I needed that a while ago, but now we get it. So it's good to correct your errors. I make them too, still make them, and that's okay. We make them all the time. It's good to correct them. If it doesn't look right, then it is not right. Something's wrong. If it doesn't look right, something's wrong, and it's up to you to change the look. All right, for the next one now, figuring out what I want to show here. So we're going to get something where we're looking down on the foot in a little bit more extreme kind of positioning. So let's see how to hold this. How did I figure out how to hold it? About like that, I think, pretty much. So we're going to look nicely down on that. I'll move the tibia and fibia away so we can see it. So that's what I'm conceiving about right into there. So challenging position. First thing is gesture, as always. Get the gesture. I'm going to figure out the ending point of that, and it's going to be very arched. Look at that. So that's the curve I'm thinking. It's not as flat as you think. Remember that foot, that longitudinal arch is very arched underneath the malleolus or malleoli of both of them. So that's very important to get that look. And you can tell, look at in this view how far pushed over laterally the calcaneus is. It's really, really pushed over. It's amazing. Because we get the tibia and fibia now, they're going to lock in as a C-clamp and grab that. So there's what I'm thinking where the fifth is, right in through there, the fifth metatarsal. Then I'm thinking about the first over on the other side, and that's halfway where the foot is. So I mark it, okay, and I'm coming down. I'm thinking, okay, here to here to here is half. It's halfway in the middle, so look how long that is. And look how the curve, opposite curve is going on. You can't draw that line straight because you got to draw that arc. Just like I'm showing you, arc it. You got to arc it really good. Here we go. Arc it. That reminds me that's the business name of one of my old professors at Art Center, David McCarskey. Arc it. Arc it Forms. Great guy. Those of you that are designers or environmental designers, if you ever look up the work of David McCarskey, he's a fantastic professor at Art Center. I think he's the head of design at environmental design now. He was teaching illustration when I was there, so he could do a little bit of everything. All right, so you can see where, getting back to reality here, you can see where the tibia and fibia clamp onto now the talus and then onto the calcaneus, and how that curve really, really helped. To me, I always think of these as boats for some reason. I don't the long quality of them. So we've got that now. What I'm showing you here is, see how this goes underneath and over. So the cuneiform bones now, the navicular bone now over, and then we get to that tarsal, the first end of the tarsal, first metatarsal, and that goes underneath, very much underneath. So I'm drawing mostly bone here. And now I'm drawing a little bit of muscle and bone together just to start that frontal wedge that we want. And look how far over the wedge ends. And that's where that curve, open curve, gets to the medial side. Now I'm finding in that wonderful crease that we get. There's the creasing point of the toe, the shoe crease, or the boot crease that we get coming in through. I think of all the views I drew for these wedge demos, that was probably the easiest one. You'd be surprised. The hardest one was, for whatever reason, the one prior, and then the one coming up after this one. Those bottom ones can be a little challenging. Relatively, most at this point in time, when you get tons of experience, it's like, okay, it's just, you're gonna get it. Okay, I have to go through the time of it. Whereas when I was a kid, I'm like, this is really hard. It gets easier if you do more. Keep on doing. Now I'm just working the wedges, thinking about combining the bone with the wedge structure and then blocking these. Keeping these simple. This turns down. Look how much that turns from not the true center. Look how far over the curve it really is. That's a long curve to get over. It's way pushed over to almost the medial edge of the malleolus, but not quite. You can see where it ends. And it curves around there of the malleolus back to the Achilles heel area, the tarsal crease. Then I'm just going to kind of roughen the rest of the wedge of the foot here, looking more down as a box, and I get a little bit into the toe. I don't want to get too deep into those. We're going to spend some time going on over those individually. And a little bit of the outside of what would be a big toe, roughly in through there. Notice how the curvature of the bone leads us slightly back into the center part, the medial part of the foot, or the center part of the foot, if you will. That all wedges, it's a downward trend there. This is a transversal trend over and across. Pulling that through, and it gets a little higher there, higher, and then it falls down. Padding of the foot a little bit further. And I could put the back of the calcaneus with the padding on the back a little bit in front. Now taking the black and starting to tighten this up further. So I'm using Conte sticks. They're wonderful. They don't last long. That gradual curve. Remember the one we just did before that? We gradually, this is the one was underneath it. Now it's a gradual curve up, hits that medial curve there, and then really turns and goes underneath. But that gets a gradual opening into the foot. Now we get this wedge through here. Finding those center points, those tarsal points, running through there. The end of that box a little bit, running through there. It's like a tarsal showing through that wedge crease there. To the real strong one where the phalangeal metatarsal crease right there is really strongest in our shoes. Then just a simple curve for the end of the toes. Try to find where they line. They're going to have a curvature, curved kind of positioning, and they get shaved downward gradually. And then kind of just feeling a toe and a condyle. And squaring that off as we're looking almost on top of it, 3/4, but from a top point of view. And I show a little tendon coming across, how that can come across there, just to show that off a little bit. Sideward positioning now, shaving that back towards the ground. You'll see that a little bit more shaved downward. Back and through here, this cuneiform's up. Now the padding of the end of the calcaneus to the talus in the beginning of the heel. That's probably a little pushed too forward, but that's okay. And getting that to work in. And then Achilles area, the little hollow in between there. Working through the malleolus of the medial area, medial malleolus, up the bone of the tibia, ending that to the fibula. Look at that longitudinal curve, really transversal curve underneath there. All right, here we are to our last one. So I'm setting up what's going to be probably a wickedly difficult one. So we're looking underneath now, and we've got the medial side of the right foot. So looking underneath as if we're getting a foot down on us, or we're on top of that foot actually, or it could be stomping on something. Anyway, we're going to get this very difficult point of view here as we're working and through. First of all, I'm getting the gesture of the foot and letting you know there we've got that what that arc looks like, and then working from what I'm thinking is the tip of the bone to the big toe. Of course, that'll go out further, and then we're getting that arced inside sole of the foot, which comes from the big toe and moves all the way over to the other side of the calcaneus on the lateral side. So we're just figuring out calcaneus bone down below and its back part where the Achilles heel would be, in through here now to get that to work for us. And it's really nice under arch, curved, and then there we go, kind of coming out. We start to feel that fifth metatarsal. Those little reference points will become handy for you as you learn to draw deeper and quicker. And then it's going to be a really wicked view of the malleola, the ankles of the lateral and the medial that we'll see mostly. And here we're almost looking straight. I'm almost looking straight down on it, so it's very, very foreshortened, which is an exciting kind of view. And so now I'm feeling where the fifth is over there on the lateral side. It curves over, and then where the end of that bone is will be roughly the end of the pinky toe, and I'm going to block all those together later on. Up and over to the tip of what I think is that curved arch, and through there. And we'll block that. It's kind of the end of our plane of our foot. It's like a rectangular plane first, and then we make it a little bit more triangular. And we'll show you why it's still a triangle, as we're going to see an interesting view in that we're going to get that footprint pad view. Remember, it's on the lateral side, and then we're going to see as that gradual opening underneath the foot curve back up to the top of the foot curves gradually, and then we get into the medial malleoli, but it's gradual and it takes on some interesting little ridges with the plantar ligament in roughly the middle, coming from the underneath the calcaneal area up to the front area of the foot. Fat pad there, we're thinking about it. The beginning part of it, its thickness, it's pretty thick. Protects your foot from the absorption of crushing blows, weight, movement, and also objects. Thorns and thumbtacks don't go all the way through. Nails won't go all the way through to the bone. Mercifully, it still doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, but it protects you from the inevitable damage you would do to your foot and ligaments and tendons and etc. Now we can see the foot pad feeling, or the footprint in the sand, or if your foot was wet on concrete, or if you painted the bottom of your feet and you stepped on something, you would not get the entire foot because we're not flat. We have arches and underneath arcs longitudinally and also transversally, and then the gradual flow from the foot pad about to the fifth metatarsal back to the medial condyle of medial malleola is pretty important. Now, this is where the triangular wedge comes in more to play, underneath and upside down. How about that for fun? As we get to the malleoli, the ankle, the malleolus of the medial, that foot will get wider later on as we get this foot just starting to work. So that's going to curve underneath. See how it's bending, curving over that foot pad, and then it curves underneath here for now for just a simple wedge view. Later on, we're going to draw feet very, very finished from reference points. So right now, we're getting a handle on just structure. That's why I don't go into too much detail. We want to be able to see this boxier, volumetric structure across those foot pads, across and over. So I like to draw with the sanguine or that burnt orange to get my rough land, and then I can tighten it up with black and get a finished feel for things. So you can see where we're starting to get a better foot pad going, and now we're going to come over to the calcaneal area and get that foot pad working, that big sort of heeled, what we know is the heel. We think of the heel as that underneath area, but it's also the ankle and the heel together, and it's that fat pad on top, and it's more like a spongy, pillowy, hard kind of box that works. In through here, here we go. Remember, so we're working all this from bone, and we're trying to find the wedges of the foot through our beginning knowledge of bone, and mostly out of our head. So now and through here, I'm stepping back and looking a little now at the malleolal area, or ankle area, and that's going to be now really starting to come underneath, curving in through, and now everything is getting sliced downward. There we go. Now it's moving. It's moving in that direction down towards the ankle, but it's gradual. But it's down towards the ankle, but it's really actually back up the foot to the leg. And so now I'm getting the ankle, the medial malleolus, and we're looking almost practically underneath it. And you see that horseshoe shape as it C-clamps and it grabs onto the medial side, and that's going to continue on over to the other side to finish and connect up with the fibula and grab all the way to the other side. So we're only getting a little part of that clamping structure as it curves around. It's a C-clamp, but it's also kind of an oval in its longitudinal position. We don't think about that as much, but it's there for us. So back up the stem, now going back up the leg from the ankle, and then the lines coming up are going to go back up. There we go. And yes, back up now too. That would be pointing in the direction of the calf into there. So laid in the basics now. It's a very challenging, is a challenging position. Now we're going to come back on with some darker charcoal here in a moment, and or Conte, and kind of get this thing a little tighter. It's a nice change. I mean, I really emphasize the divot in the fall of the fat pad here, right in through here. See how far pushed over it is? There's the center, which is off center. That little divot there is also the plantar ligament, which can come out, and that gives you a little bit of bump within that flat range, that plane area. It's like geography. And then we get over to the condyle of the first metatarsal to the phalanx of the proximal phalanx, and then this really comes over that fat pad. Really going to turn over in perspective now. And then bulge. And I'm thinking of it kind of like the heel as a boxy pillow. Finding that edge, curving that around over to the foot. Getting that to come through and turn. We'll get some contour lines on that. There we go. We get some to move for us. Pushing that toe back. Don't want to get too much into toe yet. But it's kind of a triangular block. Takes on the shape of the bone. Feeling that edge, the toe. And finally I just settle on it. Just a simple top box for it for now. Push that back a little bit. There we go. Let me simplify it for now. Then there's a spatial divot between the two that you get these fat pads. It gets a little thinner in the split in the middle. So I'll overemphasize that and show you how this comes down, turns, comes down and over like so. It's a gradual change. It could get softer. I make it more volumetric just so we can emphasize this drawing of the foot. More demonstrably boxy for now, and then it can, once we get into more finished or more studies from life or from observation or reference points, we can be even more realized. We can simplify that. So for now, so that comes down. We're bringing that down, curving that around, curving that over and back. They tend to come together now. And there's a little space, a little thickness there of that. I emphasize that a little more than what's needed to show you how, see that, how that turns over, that's turning inside there. Fat pad there and with more muscle and tendon underneath. But what's really important is this area now behind the fat pad down below, or as we're rising up the foot, how gradual. That's important to see that and continue to emphasize that. Okay, pushing that downward. Emphasizing the pad now. And the back part, the end of the Achilles, and then now the medial side curving in there. And behind it starts to get hollow in gradual shading. Calcaneal tuberosity through there where the Achilles and the bursa will attach. Now we're really getting that plantar ligament, and now we're going to start to really graduate this stepping down. So we've already got the fat pad ridge. We don't have on this side, so it flattens out there, then it turns and goes back medial, and it starts its way back up, this movement and rhythm through the foot. This is important to get and see over time. I could get a little bit harder condyle area. I kind of emphasize that through there. And you can emphasize that the top wedge of the foot, if we were looking down, that's a more triangular medial area, and then we lead up to the medial malleolus to the C-clamp, curving downward, gradual, getting up, curving actually upward since we're upside down, curving upward. So all this you want to start to feel and learn. And we've got that area of the talus, looking up underneath it. Curving around now. Curving through and getting now back over to the calcaneal heel pad. Feeling that side coming down. And then I finished this out with, put a little background in there. I had to cut it and take a phone call, and then I had to come back and put a little bit of the finish on the right side to give a little bit of shading and value through there, and turn those fat pads a little bit further. But it gives you kind of a basic wedge view of I wouldn't say a diagram, but a sketch of the underneath as I just start to feel it through. Then if you have a difficult view, you can take and flip your drawing and look at it the opposite way and see how it looks. And it looks like it's coming together pretty well from what we did underneath. That was a pretty wickedly tough view. And then you can, like I did here, flip it and take a look, and it's as more relatively normative view of the bottom of the foot, and it looks like it's all kind of come together in a decent way for a wedge sketch. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.